Hi, it's Veronique from the CogniDiet Lifestyle Show. And this is my first. I'm very excited because I have Dr. Clifford Lazarus here, psychologist specialized in cognitive behavioral therapy around Princeton. And this show, I hope, will help you transform your life and get vibrant and healthy and happy. Today we are starting with Dr. Clifford Lazarus, but in the future I will have other hosts. We are going to cover topics such as stress relief, healthy eating, enjoying your life and being happy. But let me turn to Dr. Clifford Lazarus. Thank you for being here again. So tell us, who are you and what is your relationship with cognitive behavioral therapy that we are going to call CBT in the future? It's such a long word.
Well, first, thank you very much for inviting me. I'm very happy to be here, Veronique. Well, cognitive behavioral therapy and I go back very far because I'm very proud to say my father was one of the pioneers who pretty much put cognitive behavioral therapy on the map. So it's in my family. In fact, you could say I am a member of quite literally the first family of cognitive behavioral therapy because of the pioneering work of my late father, Professor Arnold Lazarus.
So tell us, Dr. Lazarus, what is CBT? How does that work?
CBT is really a method of psychological treatment that involves working in the present rather than exploring the past. In essence, it involves corrective thinking and corrective action that brings about changes in either lifestyle or emotional experience. People will come to me because they're unhappy with some part of their life or with some of their emotional experience. And through the methods of CBT, which again involves mostly corrective thinking, corrective action, we bring about these desirable changes in other areas of a person's life, their emotions, their relationships, their lifestyle.
So it can apply to a lot of issues. And I personally was treated with CBT for my anxiety a couple of years ago. So what else can CBT help your patients for?
Well, really the full range of difficulties that people experience and a whole host of emotional and social challenges really can be very well addressed and helped with cognitive behavioral therapy methods, which really originated with the effort to marry the science of psychology with the practice of psychotherapy. And the idea was it wasn't working with the psyche that was important, but rather with people's behaviors and their thoughts, because that's something that was much more concrete and actionable in the present.
So it all starts in your brain.
Well, indeed it does. Indeed it does. I tell people often feet first, emphasizing the importance of changing behavior, because we're not going to improve our lives by continuing to engage in the patterns of action that are creating problems for us, so there needs to be a shift with behavior. But the way we shift that behavior is head first, and that is it starts with a corrective thought that leads to a corrective action that leads to a corrective shift in some other area.
So let's say that I am catastrophizing the future. I am always worried about everything. How can you help me or anybody regarding their outlook on the future with CBT? How can you help you rewire my brain so I start to catastrophize?
Well, decatastrophizing is a very important cornerstone in the foundation of some of the cognitive work that's done. And what I would do if someone is anxious is I would discuss with them some of what we would consider to be the mental mistakes that they're making that could be intensifying their anxiety. And I would also want to teach them a repertoire of certain behaviors that can help relieve their anxiety, such as relaxation, guided imagery, meditation, mindfulness. These are some scientifically validated techniques that can be very powerful in managing anxiety.
So what about the fact that I would come to you and say, I am ugly, I cannot lose weight, I don't change the way I eat. Help me, Dr. Lazarus. How would you help me, practically speaking, to lose the weight?
Well, the first thing that I would do is encourage people to change the way they're framing that very problem. As I had mentioned, corrective thinking is an important part of cognitive behavioral therapy, and one very common technique is called cognitive reframing. For instance, the classic example, the glass is half full, not half empty. That's just looking at it a little differently. So I would come to that person with the suggestion that they, rather than think about losing weight, focus instead on gaining health. How do we gain health? And let's not get too focused on actually losing weight. Because the reality is when people implement methods of gaining health, it's almost inevitable they're going to have corresponding reductions in body weight. Not because that's the objective necessarily, but that's just a welcome side effect of working on being a healthier person with a greater repertoire of health behavior.
So do you make them write goals? Do you make them do some journaling? How does that work?
Well, excellent question, and I know this sounds like I'm being evasive, but it depends.
Okay.
Everyone, as I'm sure you would agree, is a unique human being. And so there are some people with whom journaling and those kinds of concrete techniques just don't seem to work because a person may not feel the value in them or be ready to do them. So really it depends. But ideally, yes, I would get people to really put skin in the game by doing things such as keeping a food record, which can be extremely helpful. And again, not with the emphasis of counting calories or avoiding certain kinds of foods, but keeping a food journal. That would be one method that can be very, very powerful in these kinds of corrective behaviors.
And if I am at a cocktail party surrounded by a lot of temptations and drinks, and I'm in the mood to enjoy myself, but I want to lose weight and become healthier, how can CBT practically help me? What would be your advice to me before or when I am at the party?
That's a wonderful question. What I would encourage many people to do is to load up before going to the party with a nice healthy salad or some serving of a good vegetable to give them a sense of satisfaction in their tummies, and also that way likely reduce some of the intensity of the urges or the cravings that they would feel. Before that though, in the therapy, I would work with them on certain visualization techniques, such as having the person imagine digging in and pulling up the discipline and the willpower to refuse certain kinds of unhealthy temptations, recognizing that that kind of positive action will buoy up their self-satisfaction. People are proud when they do things that they know are in their best interest and will feel a sense of guilt or shame if they engage in behaviors that they know are going to be undesirable.
So the more you repeat the desired behavior, the more you are changing, the quicker you are changing. There is one thing I use a lot with my clients is I always tell them, if you are at a cocktail party or whatever, imagine yourself in the yogi position with your two hands like this, and one on the right is the healthy you, the happy, healthy, you're in control person, and the other one is the short-term temptation, the willingness to say, okay, I'm going to enjoy myself now. And it's really a very practical and useful visualization you can have at one point to say, okay, let's get this one up. What do you think about this?
I think that's a great method, and you're absolutely right. Repetition and consistency are among the keys of success. That the more people practice healthy habits, the more ingrained they become, and the less conscious effort is necessary to continue to engage in them. So what you're discussing is a little bit like the image of a devil on one shoulder and an angel on the other shoulder, chiming these ideas into people's minds. And what you're encouraging with your metaphor is to get the voice of the angel to dominate the devil.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I also found that getting my clients to have a vision of the new you, and I really make them describe how they feel, how they dress, how they look, to make it really vibrant is also very helpful. Like, projecting yourself as a new person and then having the goal to get there.
That's wonderful. That's actually squarely in part of the tools that CBT clinicians use, and that in my case would involve certain kinds of visualization techniques again. A goal image, which would be to have a person try to imagine what he or she would feel like and look like when he or she has achieved a certain measure of health. And then the process imagery. What are the individual steps that need to be taken? The process that we can break it down to so that you can proceed towards that particular goal, ultimately achieving what it is that right now the person might only be able to imagine. So goal images and process images are very helpful, and again, an important aspect of some of the cognitive behavioral therapy methods.
I've also noticed, well, I'm always trying to attract clients who are ready to change, because you have to be ready to change.
Yes.
So how do you feel about resistance, and from a statistical perspective, what are the results of CBT in general, and not just for weight loss? But you must have some patients who are more resisting than others, even if they come to you for help.
That's quite true. Readiness for change is vitally important, and it remains one of the mysteries of the profession. There are some great researchers working on this quite diligently, but it still remains very murky. Why is it that some people are ready to change and others aren't? I assume that people have a certain degree of readiness to change when they come to see me, because they've made the phone call, they've scheduled the appointment,
Yes.
and they've shown up. But even then,
Yes.
sometimes it takes a while to get people to actually start to do the methods that I would be proposing. So if we can figure out what it is that can propel someone from thinking about changing to actually behaving in methods and manners that reflect change, then there's a Nobel Prize for us.
Yes. I always say also to my clients that I'm like a tennis teacher or a piano teacher, that I can give them the tools and explain them what to do, how it works, and so forth, but they have to practice. If you don't practice, you will never become a very good tennis player. Isn't that the same
right.
for CBT?
Well, it really is, and that's why CBT often will involve elements of homework, because I use a very similar example with my patients. I would say to them, exactly, if I were teaching you to play piano, and the only time you practice is during the hour in which we're sitting on the bench together, you'll pick up some tricks, but you won't really achieve your potential nearly as quickly as you would if instead you practiced a good 8 or 7 hours between our tutorials. Similar to a person who only will exercise when they have a weekly session with a personal trainer. It's better that they do some between their personal trainings, efforts at the gym on their own time. So practice is very important, and the assigning of specific homework tasks and activities can be vitally important and accelerate people's path to their goals.
I've also noticed that it's a very important, I'm sure you see this with your patient, to make them really feel good and encouraged by their progress. So in my classes, there is always a lot of repeating, what were the milestones achieved this week, even the non-scale victories, because you may have finally conquered the donuts and not lost weight that week, but it doesn't matter. So I make them repeat and repeat many times all the great things about themselves.
That's a wonderful technique for people to really get in touch with a lot of their qualities and traits and their attributes that they can feel proud of, and that might not be something that shows on the outside. And that's an important aspect. A lot of people do tend to compare their inside with someone else's outside.
Yes.
And I think that's always tricky.
Yeah, and some people are quicker to change than others, and you're right, it's always very important to get them focused on, like, I lost 10 pounds already, it doesn't matter if she or he lost 15. This is my victory. I don't have to compare myself to others.
That's very important. Not to. It's a natural tendency, of course, to make those kinds of comparisons, but it's usually not particularly helpful, because again, we're all unique individuals, and we can't expect that what worked for one person will work for everyone else. So recognizing one's uniqueness and celebrating those individual differences is very important to keep people motivated, because almost everyone will succeed, provided they have crossed that threshold from thinking about it to ready to do something about it in terms of readiness for change, and then they persist. Because stick-to-itiveness or perseverance is another huge predictor of success with any endeavor that we do as human beings.
I also, this is something I learned when I was working in the pharmaceutical world, because we worked on some behavioral, programs, that you may try to change and feel like you haven't done such a good job, but every time you try to change, you are giving yourself an even bigger chance to succeed as you continue. So even if you feel at one point, I did not really achieve 100% of what I wanted to achieve, but you still have kind of solidified your brain into this mode of changing.
Well, that's quite, yes, that's quite right. I think that's very astute of you to recognize that. The more we change our behavior,
right?
Even if we don't succeed, I mean, of course, we want to make sure that we're not trying in a manner that isn't going to be productive. Because again, if we persist with bad habits and maladaptive actions, then we're probably not going to get good results. Because the behaviors that have led us into problems won't be the same behaviors that lead us out of problems. And in terms of discussing that in the cognitive area, Einstein himself, a fellow Princetonian for quite a time, said, the thinking that got us into trouble will not be the same thinking we need to get us out of trouble. So hence we have to change our thinking, we have to change our action, and that then brings about other desirable shifts in how we feel, how we relate, or our overall just health and satisfaction as people. Persistence is important, and the more a person behaves differently, well, quite literally, they're recruiting different parts of their brain. And because of, as you write wonderfully about in your book, neuroplasticity, our brains can change. Like a muscle, if you're doing the same old activities, you're not doing yourself as much good as you would be if you changed it up and recruited different fibers. So don't do the same physical exercise all the time. Change the grip, change the weight, change the method, and recruit different fibers. Similarly, changing behavior, changing thoughts, recruits different pathways in the brain. Ones we want to strengthen, we will strengthen by repetition, just like we would strengthen a muscle through repetition of resistance exercise.
Yeah, they say it takes 21 days to change a habit, like maybe getting the very sugary coffee and, in the coffee shop every morning. It's repetition that really makes the difference.
I found when I jettisoned the sugar from my coffee, it took a little longer for me to really make peace with that, for it to really sink in and become habitual, which I'm happy to say it is now. So again, I think it needs to be individually calibrated. There are some people who might find that some of their habitual behaviors change pretty quickly, and others might need a little bit of a longer runway. So again, we need to recognize that and encourage people to continue with their efforts, even if the goal seems to be a bit elusive.
So we have been working together. You have been my advisor and counselor as I was writing my book, Rewire Your Brain, using the CogniDiet curriculum and methodology. And I've been very fortunate to have you and very honored.
Thank you.
So why did you accept to work with me?
I was impressed by your program when you introduced me to it, because I found it had very strong scientific underpinnings. Unlike a lot of weight management and weight loss programs, you took a couple extra steps and really were emphasizing a lot of what I discuss about the gaining health perspective rather
Yes,
than just the weight
absolutely.
loss method. You looked at biomarkers such as hemoglobin A1C, a measure of someone's sugar regulation. You looked at their cholesterol and their lipids and their triglycerides, not just the weight on the scale. The tail of the scale can sometimes be misleading. So what impressed me was not just your approach that wove a lot of the threads of CBT methods into your tapestry, but also the scientific underpinnings that I thought were quite important.
The science of nutrition, because I have noticed that one of the things my clients really love is, and maybe it's my nerd background, you know, I'm an engineer by training, that I really explain to them the why. Why is sugar not good for you? What is sugar doing to you? Why do you need to eat protein? Why do you need to eat good fats?
Right.
You know, and I feel like an empowered and educated person feels more confident and gets like more tools to change. And that is something that always comes back from the program, that my clients say, well, no, I know why I need to change, or no, I know why this was not working when I was trying to lose weight.
Very important. That what we would call a psychoeducative approach really is the foundation of cognitive behavioral therapy. In terms of the cognitive piece, it really boils down to correcting misinformation and providing missing information. For instance, people might have the misconception that fat is bad for them, and that a low-fat diet or a low-carb.
Today,
and it's even more bewildering that people think they shouldn't have carbohydrates. No. We need to correct that misconception and provide them with the missing information that there are very healthy fats that you actually want as an important part of your diet.
And they help you lose weight.
And they do. Similarly, good carbohydrates, what we call low glycemic load, low glycemic index carbohydrates, are very, very healthy. So correcting the misconception, fats are bad, and providing missing information, well, not if you're eating avocados and olive oil and nuts and seeds.
But it's coming back now. People are finally but I feel like they're going now on the other hand, you know, like we always go into excess.
Yes.
So now you have, I always say, well, eat more good fat, like nuts and so forth, but you still have to watch your calories.
Well, this is true, but it's pretty hard to overdo calories if you're eating things like kale and Brussels sprouts and broccoli and wonderful salads.
Absolutely.
I mean, people, I encourage them, go for it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Be a glutton at the salad bar as long as you're not getting big mayonnaise saturated blobs of stuff on there.
Yeah.
I'm very taken by a quote by Michael Pollan, a wonderful mind. He's published quite extensively.
He's an inspiration to me.
He's and myself, and particularly his famous quote. He advises that people eat food, not too much, mostly plants.
Yeah.
So food is not high fructose corn syrup and partially hydrogenated soybean oil. That's not food. That's almost like Frankenstein.
Manipulated
Oh my goodness,
food.
really?
Yeah.
So food, it's more natural materials.
And natural food is very important, because I just read, I was horrified, that the American IQ in test is going down. And there are several explanations. But one of the explanations is bad nutrition.
Yes.
So good and healthy nutrition is important, not just for weight, but for your brain health, for your body health, for your mind health, for everything.
Absolutely, and that's why I think a very important emphasis is on gaining health, and we need to really make sure that we're not too hyper-focused on losing weight. And of course, as you recommend in your program, exercise is a vital element of the behavior in the cognitive behavioral approach to not just overall health and wellness and emotional happiness, but certainly in terms of any efforts at weight management and weight control. People have a misconception, again, that they can lose weight by exercising. And actually that's not really true unless you're putting in a heck of a lot of time at the gym.
It's food first.
That's right. We lose weight
Yeah.
by reducing calories and maintain overall health and our reduced body weight through exercise.
But you know what? I'm coming back from the American Society of Nutrition meeting in Boston last week. And by the way, I'm very proud because my findings were accepted as an abstract, and I was invited to present a poster.
That's fantastic.
With not only my 12 months data, but also my 6 months follow-up. That in fact shows that the women on the trial continue to lose weight, an extra 2 pounds to be added to the average 12 pounds. But I went to a presentation where they showed that going to the gym to exercise, seriously for 1 hour or maybe even 1.5 hours is not enough anymore. That they show that our physiology, we need to move all day long. And standing desks, walking desks, taking breaks and so forth are crucial for the continuation of the burning the calories. If we only do 1 hour of exercise at the end of the day, we are not going to burn our calories the same way. And that was a big not an eye opener, but a major learning for me, that 1 hour was not enough. So
Right.
I think we're coming to the end of our wonderful conversation. Thank you so much, Dr. Lazarus, to be with us today. Thank you again for having worked with me on the book. And now I want to say, have a great, great day. Focus on your health. Be happy, be healthy, and see you next time. This is the CogniDiet Lifestyle Show with Veronique Cardon. Goodbye.